Helldivers 2 has once again made its community angry by deflating brand new content with the thing that every player dreads: weapon nerfs. And I'm here with what I feel is a solution to the problem, because it's really hard to know what exactly their endgame is at this point. Is it just the eternal battle to balance a game with lots of different weapons and stratagems, or is it some form of psychological manipulation where they attempt to create problems or frustrations that they will just fix later? Well, whatever it is, I have to say they need a change in philosophy, because the pattern of game developers doing something that fans don't like and then responding to the complaints by saying that they are listening only to do it again anyway, well, it's starting to feel like a gaming version of Groundhog's Day, only without quirky one-liners from Bill Murray. Because we are here, once again, in the wake of nerfs, and the community has responded, and they are not happy. And to his credit, the CEO has responded as well. He indicated that every update receives a variety of feedback, from casual moms and dads to milsim players. Everyone enjoys or dislikes certain things. But he also said that every update requires a bit of playtime before they can know which direction to, quote, fine-tune things. And that term right there is the crux of the problem. Helldivers 2 is not a game that needs to be fine-tuned. It's a game with bugs, bots, bombs, and bullets. And while I do think the call for, well, just buff everything or just raise the stuff that is weaker, well, it sounds good on the surface, it's just too simplistic of a view and would actually create the exact same problem that the nerfs create, just in reverse. So I want to walk through what happened, why just nerfing or just buffing is not the answer, and how the solution to this problem is far more simplistic and on brand than everybody is making it. Now, every weekday here on Reforge Gaming, I tell you what I think about a gaming topic, and then we go to a live stream where I want to know what you think. So if you like this content, please remember to hit like and subscribe. So what happened? Well, rather than bore you with all the specific details and numbers, suffice it to say that some of the more popular weapons were nerfed. And why? Well, according to the developer, because they were popular. Was it broken? Was it trivializing content, breaking the game? No, it was just a popular weapon. Don't believe me? Well, look at two different comments here. According to VG247, in their article about this, the CEO said the following in their Discord: "The incendiary breaker was like 30% of Terminid sessions at some point. Very much a meta gun. Is that a problem? Yes. Is it a big one? I don't know. We'll discuss it." And he said something similar on Twitter, which really drives home the issue here. In a tweet responding to someone bringing up the incendiary breaker and weapon design intent, the CEO said this: "No idea on the design intent. I think where we ended up was, it was by far the most picked weapon against Terminids." Now, I appreciate somebody being transparent and candid as much as the next person, but both of these statements made in the Discord and on Twitter, they put on full display what the issue is. There is not a unifying vision or a philosophy driving this game. It is all reactionary. Oh, a lot of people are using a weapon? Well, that's not good. Nerf it so less people use it. Did you ever consider analyzing why the weapon was being used and then figuring out a way to channel that into other changes or updates? I'm not saying that every strong weapon needs to be completely left alone, but this reactionary philosophy of, if a lot of people are using something, we better nerf it, well, that doesn't feel like anyone is driving the ship. It feels like you're just bouncing off of data points in a reactionary way. Also, saying things like, "No idea on the design intent," or "Is that a problem? Yes. Is it a big one? I don't know." Well, it just sounds like nobody really knows what the goal is, so they're just sort of pulling levers and turning dials and then asking the community for feedback. Well, the feedback is coming through loud and clear. The player peak on Steam was 62,000 on the day the update hit, and the day after, it's falling well below that in the 40,000s. Keep in mind, the game held its strongest player engagement position on Steam, according to the data reports, so it's totally fair to use Steam as the barometer of player response, which, if you look at recent reviews, you can see why the player numbers aren't seeing much of a surge here. A huge spike in negative reviews is seen both the day the update hit, and even more of them the day after. And listen, the same problem with reacting to just nerfing a popular gun can be seen in a typical response every time this happens. People will say, well, just buff everything. That's something that's commonly advocated for in a variety of ways. Basically saying it makes more sense to raise up underrepresented weapons and stratagems rather than nerfing the popular ones. Well, that's just another reaction that won't work, and there's a few reasons why. The fundamental problem with just buffing weapons that aren't getting enough use is it's just the opposite side of the coin. You are still just reacting. It's not stemming from a clear vision or a goal. It's just a reaction to player behavior with the foolhardy hope of getting the game into some mythical unicorn-like balanced state. The other problem with just buffing everything is, well, it doesn't work. You still end up with the same result. Players combing over everything, finding what they think is the best, and then more players will clamor to whatever has been determined to be the strongest. And whether or not you nerf the standouts or buff the weaklings, it doesn't matter. The result is the same. You get a flattened out meta of weapons, and players will search for the one or the build that is the best. And all you've accomplished in the process is the same thing, a boring and neutered cascade of weapons that all feel basically the same. And the search for a meta weapon is less exciting and less celebrated because it's likely only marginally better than everything else. So if nerfing is a reactionary way, and that's not the answer, and if buffing is just a reactionary way, and that's not the answer, what is the answer? I have said this before, and it bears repeating anytime this subject comes up. Balance is boring. It will always be boring, and it's about 10 times more boring in a PvE-only game. Well, why? Because the last time I checked, the Terminids aren't going to Reddit and Twitter to complain about certain guns being OP or unfair. What's next? Are we going to do skill-based matchmaking for the bugs and the bots too? And honestly, balance isn't just boring. It's a complete and total fool's errand, a seemingly ever-moving target that each update, each piece of new content or new weapon can completely turn upside down. So, step number 1 in fixing this problem, develop a game philosophy that throws balance as a goal out the window. It's not helping you. It's not helping your game. And you can crunch the numbers and you can tell me and you can tell other people, well, this weapon's still viable. It's still worth using. It doesn't matter. You've made something they loved weaker, which will always feel far worse than the objective mathematical reality of the change. And that perception matters more than your numbers or your data points. Nobody boots up a game, uses a weapon or a build that feels weaker after a nerf and says, well, before I get angry or disappointed about this, I better check Twitter or a blog post to see if I'm wrong about how this doesn't actually feel good. So if you've properly and you have firmly jettisoned the goal of balance from your building, write it in big fat letters on a dry erase board somewhere, balance is boring, well, now you're ready for part 2. Embrace the pendulum of chaos. Look, no matter how you square it, you will always make adjustments to a game like this. There are far too many guns, stratagems, enemies, and content pieces to just leave things as they are. So, accept that a pendulum must swing, okay? Instead of going for what the CEO called fine-tuning, swing that pendulum for the fences. And the beautiful thing about Helldivers is you can quite literally make it part of the game and the lore. You could add a new station to the ship, call it the R&D FD station, the Research and Development for Democracy station, and instead of just nerfing something because everybody is using it, create an in-game messaging notice that says something to the effect of, these guns and stratagems are currently in experimental classification, and you would make those guns and stratagems crazy, make them chaotic. The game is already in a place where there's an element of this. There's the unsafe mode on the railgun. It would be similar to that, but crank it up a bit. I'm not talking about simply buffing guns and stratagems here. I'm talking about chaos. Make the game nuts. And if you do it this way, you have created a perfect reason to tone those weapons and stratagems back down in the future. You would say something like, okay, Helldivers, we gathered enough intel on those weapons and stratagems. The experimental versions are no longer available. And when you do that, you would offer a whole new slate of weapons and stratagems that are also experimental. Think about it. It's perfect. You have a war bond, and let's say the theme is electricity or fire or explosions. Well, now you have the perfect theme for what should be getting the chaos experimental treatment. The bugs or the bots or the major order, they could have us doing something on a certain planet, maybe with certain modifiers. No problem. The R&D FD is here to give us new experimental stuff to try out. And the beauty of a system like this is you are actually creating a meta and giving players super strong, busted stuff, all with the understanding that it won't last for forever. So rather than reacting, taking the fun away, or nerfing this or buffing that, you're creating seasons of dominance for weapons and stratagems, which keeps the game fresh because players would be regularly trying new builds and new weapons. You see, what you're doing is you're taking that data point that you use to justify the latest nerf, and you're interpreting it in a way to make the game better. Oh, everybody's clamoring to this really strong thing? Well, we can't have that. No, you say, players will clamor to power. Well, let's give it to them. Players are like water. Direct the water rather than just react to it. Look, at the end of the day, my message to the devs is simple. Stop taking your game so seriously. This is not a competitive PvP game. This is not a game with a super serious tone. The posture of the devs and the CEO talking about fine-tuning or making tweaks, that just seems so out of step with the vibe of the game. The current content philosophy will just see depreciating returns because right now, the pendulum is swinging, but it's barely moving. No matter how you shake it, games like this have to make adjustments. Nerfs and buffs are unavoidable. Why not chart a new course? One that says, we are driving this vision, not playing popular gun whack-a-mole. In other words, embrace chaos. And if you do, the player base will likely embrace it with you. But those are just my thoughts, and now it's time to hear your thoughts. And you can do that in a comment below or come to the live stream that follows this video. It'll hit a card right here. It'll also be in a pinned comment below. And if you like this content and you want more like it, please remember to like, share, and subscribe.